and welcome to Season 3, Episode 6 of Creative Glue, where we continue to explore the common bond that unites creatives from around the globe. I'm your host, Scott Robinson, and today I'm joined by Stephan Fleet, a visual effects supervisor whose career has been shaped by both technical innovation and a deep commitment to storytelling. From growing up in a creative family to finding his calling at the intersection of technology and storytelling, Stephan's journey reflects a passion for using visual effects not as a spectacle but as a tool to enhance the stories we tell. His impressive credentials, including The Boys, Timeless, and Iron Fist, along with a personal project recently which he shot called XY, Stephan has nearly 2 decades in television and a career built on bridging the gap between creative vision and technical execution. Stephan brings a unique perspective on how visual story continues to evolve, and I really thank you so much for joining us today on Creative Glue.
Thank you for having me. That was very well said. I'm going to use that for my new bio, and I guess we're done here. It seems you said it all. No, I'm just kidding.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Fantastic. Look, I'd love to start with your journey, like coming from a family with acting and film backgrounds. Like, how did that early exposure to the industry sort of influence your path, both positively and in ways that might have been a bit more challenging?
Yeah, I mean, so I have an interesting backstory. You don't know this when you're a kid, but you just live your life with your parents the way you are. But I was born in Warsaw, Poland. I was born an American citizen abroad. My father's American, my mother is Polish. But they were, a theater family. My mother did theater and film in Poland in the 70s. 60s and 70s, and my father was at the time doing theater in New York, and they met doing like theater stuff, and not coming from wealth. This is very much a poor theater family, but they chased the dream, came out to LA, and when I was 3, I was in a movie that they had produced in a small independent film, and then they got another film off the ground at 6. When I say I was an actor. I was acting in it at 3, and then when I was at 6, I acted in a film that they also produced based on a book my father had written. They didn't direct it, but I was the lead actor. Christopher Lloyd actually played my father, but the film went through a lot of. It was right after Back to the Future, by the way, so he's big. And it's the 80s. It was crazy, 1986-ish to be exact, and I don't want to get too much in the details because it's complicated, but there were a lot of unfortunate legal issues that happened with that film. It kind of got released, but kind of didn't. We ended up in court for about 15 years of my life fighting legal battles. Yeah. So we ended up super poor coming back to the state. We filmed it in Poland, but we came back to the States, lost our house, moved out to the suburbs, and it was kind of a struggle growing up financially. However, we never let go of the creative dream. We were always doing creative projects, trying to make independent films back when, it's high 8 and tape. My parents were very progressive with computers. I had a Tandy 1000. I had a Commodore 64.
Wow.
And they were always very, very. I'm an only child, so it was kind of the 3 of us plus my. I like to call him my god uncle Archie. He lived with us. He's a family friend, but he lived with us and helped sort of raise me. Really great guy. And so it's kind of like the 4 of us for a long time, just making stuff. We put on plays, Shakespeare in the Park. I was part of a Korean theater group in for a while, and I toured through Seoul, Korea, doing Korean drumming for a little bit. So that was my life growing up. Contrasted with growing up in this pretty rough time and place. I went through the LA riots. I went through some pretty rough issues myself. I had my moments where I wasn't the best kid, fell in with some bad, crowds when I was a kid, things like that. But ultimately it was computers that sort of saved me. Computers and imagination, those 2 things came together. I knew I always wanted to work in film. I felt like there was this huge wall to get there because of the legal issues that we had and how difficult it was to break in. I wasn't living in LA, didn't have a lot of money, but there's actually, if you have the time, there's a really quick, interesting story about how I kind of broke back in. I did okay in school. I got my stuff together by about sophomore in high school. Didn't love school, didn't care, wasn't like an active participant, but I did some AP classes. I realized quickly that if I don't get decent grades and get into college, I can't get out of here. So I just started like doing that thing. but I don't have those like fond memories of high school like a lot of other people do. But interestingly enough, I got a little bit of money from a settlement as an actor from that film that I was in because they dubbed my voice, and that was illegal because I was a member of the Screen Actors Guild. So I had about $15,000, and this is 1992. So pretty more,
Yeah.
it'd be worth more now, but it was my college fund kind of. So, but my father had started acting in a play in Hollywood based, called Lulu, based on the work of Frank Wiedekind. He's, pretty popular German expressionist playwright. This is where I get nerdy with my theatrical history. I loved the play he was in, but they were running out of money. And so my parents sat me down and I had this crazy idea. I was like, what if I give the $15,000 to this play and produce it myself? And I'm 16 years old at this time. So I ended up producing a
Incredible.
play in Hollywood, small black box theater, 99 seater for about 6 weeks. Loved it, spent all my money on it. And then I was like, I'll figure out college later. Cut to a few years later, I'm applying to theater school at UCLA, which is a big respected campus here, and they have a good theater and film program. And I didn't have the best grades, did okay on the SATs. I wasn't like amazing. It turned out that this professor, Carl Mueller, was the foremost authority on translating that playwright from German to English. He'd seen the play, he loved it. He got me a free ride into college, basically said, "You're in." And that's how I got to college, and that's how I was able to have no money and get back in and start a life in creativity. So, you take the big swing sometimes and you never know where it'll take you.
And it doesn't always happen instantly. That's the payoff sometimes way down the track in the most unexpected of ways.
Yeah, I mean, well, because then I went to theater school again, and I tried acting for a little bit. It wasn't for me. Mainly got into writing and directing. Wonderful, supportive faculty. I ended up actually touring Poland with UCLA, doing some absurdist Polish theater. I had a fun college experience, focused on performance, but it doesn't really get you jobs. So, but weirdly, I was a intern at the Geffen Playhouse, which is one of the few larger legit theaters here in Los Angeles. It's attached to UCLA, and they were doing a David Mamet play over Christmas time. And the internship was crazy. They're like, "We'll give you a bunch of units and money because we want you to work over Christmas." And I'm like, "Great, I don't care." So I worked over Christmas. They called me Stefan from the Geffen. I worked really hard, and an actor named Ed Begley Jr. was the lead in that play. And all I did pretty much was wash dishes and be nice to people and work really hard. I did some stuff behind the scenes, but I got to be friends with Ed. He would take me to some dinners. He was just like a really nice guy. He's a vegan. And so I'd run out and get him, proper food and stuff like that because they didn't have the right food for him. Just, being nice, just doing my job. And a few years later, he hit me up and he was like, "I'm putting on a play about the life of Cesar Chavez, and I know you're kind of into graphic design and stuff. Could you help me do some visual graphics for this play?" I did that in turn to get him to agree to be in a short film that I wanted to make. It's called The First Person. I made it in 2001. It's like a black and white noir movie. That film is what got me into USC Film School, which is what got me into television. So again, you never know. Washing dishes and just being kind to people at the Geffen Playhouse
Yeah.
is what did it for me. And the kindness of Ed Begley Jr., who is to this day a very, very good dude.
Amazing. So what was that transition in terms of coming out of film school then and moving from obviously theatrical and being sort of producing and those sorts of things to moving into this sort of world of VFX?
Yeah, it was interesting. So at UCLA for my undergraduate, I learned a lot about storytelling. You're talking Aristotelian, the history of theater through the eyes of Aristotle's Poetics. Lots of these crazy classes that really stuck with me, and just performance, right? Like you're really like at the core of what makes a good performance and what makes a good story. Then you get to film school, and to be frank, I felt like a lot of the writing and directing classes were actually watered down, sort of rehashed versions of the same Aristotelian stuff I learned for theater school, with a slight edge towards film and television. But what really hit for me were actually some more of the technical classes. I didn't know a lot about camera. I didn't know a lot about cinematography. I knew computers pretty well. From graphic design, I'd always used graphic design as a side hustle. I was never formally trained in it, but when I was a kid, building like I had two choices as a kid, like drugs or computers, and I went computers. And so I learned Photoshop, and I designed my high school band's album cover art, things like that. And so in film school, I kind of took my graphic design knowledge and learned all this camera knowledge and all this technical stuff and editorial knowledge, put it together, started dabbling in I didn't really call it visual effects. I was just like, I want to make cool stuff for my movies. So I started using After Effects. I started using this program called Shake, which Apple owned at the time. Started doing it for other people's films a little bit, but really wasn't into it that much yet. I had one class. It's my last semester at USC, which I did take out loans to go to, and it was very expensive. So I'm like, I've spent now a lot of money. I was a little bit older because there's a gap between my undergrad and graduate. So I'm probably 27 years old, 26, 27. I'm like, if I don't get something out of this degree, I've just blown $120,000 and I have to go right back to hustling for a job somewhere. And, so I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. And there was one class called The Business of Television. It's not a very television focused school at the time. I don't know how it is now, but back then that was the only class. And the teacher was a gentleman named Ian Sander. And I looked it up, and Ian Sander actually was a producer of a television show on air at that time called Ghost Whisperer, which again was relatively unheard of. A lot of the professors had done great projects, but many years passed. One of my editing teacher, Bob Jones, edited all of Warren Beatty's early films, and also co-wrote Being There. I mean, like, so so you have some great talent teaching you, but again, it was from, a certain era. So and he taught me a lot, by the way, Bob Jones, but I digress. So I took Ian's class, and Ian was really big on teaching us how to pitch. And it was really like the business of television. It was really interesting. He was talking about demos, market share, numbers, like getting eyeballs. It was my first introduction to this world that I've been in for 20 years now. But there was an assignment where you had to essentially make a visual pitch, and you could do a video or like a collage sort of book. He's showing us how he pitched when he went to pitch to William Morris or to pitch to a studio, like a show. This is what he and his partner, who is his wife, Kim Moses, did, Sander Moses Productions. And I was like, this is my time, and someone once told me, if you see a crack in the door, kick your foot in it, wedge it open, and pry that door open. And I was like, I can take my graphic design skills that no one else here has and make something amazing. So I made a full printed book. I think Blurb was like pretty early in its inception. So I actually had it printed as a hardcover, full graphics, like 20 pages of graphics. I went out and I shot a video pitch. I did both, and I gave them to him. And Ian comes up to me and he's like, come see me after class. And he comes after class. He's like, you want a job? I'm like, yeah. He's like, come by the studio next week. I'll set up a meeting. So next thing you know, I'm still in school. I'm in my last semester, and I'm driving to Universal Studios, and because they were shooting on the lot at Universal Studios, and I meet with one of their development executives, and she's like, we have a pitch tomorrow morning. Could you do the graphics for it? And it was like 5:00 at night. So I'm like, okay. So I went home, worked all night. She called me every hour. I'm like, these people are crazy. Little did I know that that's how television works. Anyway, cut to, I got a job. I ended up doing sort of like, I was digital media kid for Sander Moses and Ghost Whisperer. I managed their MySpace page. I helped them produce a few webisode series. This is all around 2006, 2007 now. So I actually started in television before I started in visual effects. I ended up losing that job somewhat naturally, but also because of the 2007 writers' strike. Everyone was, kind of getting folded out. When that strike ended, some good friends of mine, Rajiv and Alon, who I went to film school with, called me up and they were like, hey, we're doing some graphics for a show called a reboot of Knight Rider. Do you still do graphics? And I was like, I'm sitting at home watching DVDs of The Wire, eating ice cream cones, broke as shit. And I'm like, yeah, I do graphics, sure. And so I ended up in Santa Clarita, which is about an hour north of LA, doing graphics for Knight Rider, the reboot. Like they wanted to have a HUD, like one of those. It was very Minority Report was
Yeah.
the big thing. I had no idea what I was doing. None of us did. Paid $1,600 a week, which for me at that time was like so much money. I was like, this is amazing. And, and I was working with my college buddies. And again, we had no idea what we were doing. And then all of a sudden the line producer comes up to us from that show. And for those that don't know, a line producer is like in charge of the money, right? And he's like, hey, this big company that's doing the visual effects for this show, it's too much money. We don't have it. If I gave you guys 150 grand flat an episode, could you do the whole show? And I'll give you office space and we'll buy all your, computer gear and stuff like that. And really it was them. I was the third partner. It was their deal, but I was along for the ride. And of course, what you say is yes. And then, for us, again, not making much money, we're like 150 grand an episode. By the way, 150 grand is a ripoff. We got highway robbery, but for 3 kids, it's like crazy. So we ended up having this, I would say the end of it, it was probably about a 15 to 20 person visual effects company up there just doing this show. And it was called Master Key. It was their company. I was like the director of operations or some made up title. But really what I did is I used it as an opportunity to learn a visual effects program called Nuke, which had just hit the market. It was created by Digital Domain as a compositing program, but they sold, the company called The Foundry bought it, and they started releasing it as this professional compositing thing. And I told all the artists there, because we were all using After Effects, which is a more, sort of popular option. I told them all, like, I think this program is going to like take off. So let's all learn it, even though we hate to and we don't want to. And we all did. And that kind of launched a lot of careers. so,
Wow.
so that was that's how I got into visual effects in television.
Amazing. And in terms of then working on projects from there, I mean, is there anything that you sort of, look back on and think like, that's been like such a transformative project? Like then it sort of took you through like what's happened in that space from there?
Well, I can tell you exactly. So I ended up, that naturally just sort of ended. Master Key lived on for a while, but they went up to Toronto, did some other shows. I needed to stay in LA. So I found myself doing another job at a company called Encore as an After Effects artist, just so sitting at a computer. And that's where I did, if you look at my IMDb, there's like 1 million shows, but it's because I would do 2 episodes of Always Sunny in Philadelphia would come in, 2 episodes of The Office. I just did a bunch of weird shit that came at me and about like 4 other guys. And then we had another team there working on the show House, and that was kind of their big show. But they weren't really a visual effects company. They were a color house that did color grading, and then we would do spillover visual effects. But again, remember, I'd learned that program Nuke, and I saw a lot of opportunity. I'm like, we could do better than this. Like, I'm an ambitious guy. Like, we can do better. So I started like bringing in Nuke myself, doing shots, teaching some other people, bringing in some people from Master Key that I knew. We started building it up. And what happened was it turned out that I'm a pretty good public speaker for whatever reason. I don't have any training in it. Maybe it's because I was in theater and I come from a boisterous theater family. But I think it was Castle, the show Castle. They had some question, again, about like smart screens. It was very smart screen forward at this time in my life. So they needed someone to go to the set and explain it to them. And I thought I was just going to go and talk to like a couple people and say, hey, yeah, this is how you set it up, whatever. I go to the set and next thing you know, like the whole crew is watching me give this demonstration, like the director, the DP, everybody. And I guess I did a good job because they're like, we like that guy. He should come to set and supervise more. Again, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I did it. And really what it was about is that I love all the things about filmmaking. I love camera. I love directing. The script supervisor on Castle at the time, she was a script supervisor on the movie Dead Man, which is a Jim Jarmusch film starring Johnny Depp. And I loved that movie. So I'm sitting there like picking her brain about this movie. Sincerely, I'm not trying to like kiss her ass. I'm just like, please tell me more experience. I'm like soaking up all this knowledge. And so it just kept going. They kept sending me out. I would then pinch it. There was a great supervisor on the show House, but he, if he was sick, I would jump in and like fill in for him. I ended up doing the show Weeds for a while. It was a great time when I was just doing all these shows. I did a lot of sort of like single camera comedies too, where I'd go out, and I did a show called Raising Hope. I did the pilot for that show. And then pilots are a little bit of a different game. They're taken a little more seriously. And what happened at that time is all of a sudden, like feature directors realized you can make a lot of money on a pilot. I don't know if people know this, and I don't know if it's true now because the world's changed. But at this time, if you did a network feature pilot and it got picked up and went to air, if you just directed that one episode, you were an executive producer and you got a percentage off the gross in perpetuity.
Wow.
So imagine you're the guy that directed like the pilot of Law and Order like 30 years ago or something like that. You're still making money to this day when they make new episodes of that show. Seriously.
Bolt
So I think
coin.
I think there's ways to buy people out and stuff. But anyway, so all of a sudden, like crazy feature director things, and TV was getting more ambitious. HD had hit. You had shows like Lost, shows like 24. People were starting to push the boundaries and saying like, we can take the spectacle of the big screen and put it on the little screen. But behind the scenes, like, it was so painful. Because you're trying to do what features have a year to do in like 3 weeks. Like the time is so
Yeah.
compressed for television. So I became that supervisor guy that ended up doing a lot of feature pilots for Encore. And one in specific that I did, it was the pilot called Lock and Key. Not the Lock and Key that aired on Hulu. That was actually 3 shows later. They did a
Right.
pilot for Fox, they did a pilot for Hulu, and then they did the pilot for Netflix. So I did the first one, the pilot for Fox, just as a vendor supervisor. There was actually a show side supervisor. His name was Brad Parker, who's a really, really amazing high-end visual effects supervisor. And there was another guy from another company named Sean Faden, who's also now like a really talented, really good visual effects supervisor. And I was like the data guy, like third banana guy. But I went up there, and the director was a guy named Mark Romanek. And Mark Romanek directed all of Nine Inch Nails music videos in the 90s. He
Awesome.
directed the movies Never Let Me Go and 1 Hour Photo. And I was like a big fan of his work. So I got to work with him. He was difficult. I don't mean he's like a bad person, but he was like demanding. Like he knew what he wanted, and it was freezing cold out there. But I got to learn this like sort of elevated in like just a 2-week shoot. I got like a crash course from Brad on supervision on like an elevated feature level. And Mark liked me because I like camera, and he's very into his lenses and cameras. So I got to learn a lot from him too. And also I'm working with like one of my idols and trying to like, stay cool. I'm like, be cool, dude. Be cool. Hardest pilot to do in the end, but it was for Amblin Television, Spielberg's
Yeah.
company. The pilot did not get picked up, but I kicked ass and I did a good job. So they picked me up to do another show. It was called The River. And then I did another show. It was called Extant with Halle Berry. And then another show. So I did all these Amblin shows for a really long time with all these like really big people attached to it. So I became that intersection of like feature sensibility with network time and money. And what happened was like streaming came along, and then it became premium streaming, and things grew and grew and grew. And like I would say Timeless was one of the most demanding shows I did, because you're doing a show that for those that know, is a time traveling show. It takes place, each episode takes place in a different era. And so it was demanding on me, because obviously visual effects, you're helping build those eras out with some special, visual effects stuff with like some sci-fi ship stuff, but mostly just era stuff. Really demanding on the crews too. I mean, imagine costumes, imagine set design on a show that you're shooting in 8 to 10 days.
Yeah.
It's like on a network schedule. So that was really demanding, but that is what got me The Boys, which I've now been doing for 8 years almost.
Amazing.
almost half my career. Yeah.
Crazy. So, I mean, television obviously does have that reputation for being so much more fast paced than film, and you talked about that. So, how do you maintain that creative vision when it's so compressed on time and what you want to be able to achieve against what you can achieve, in terms of being able to tell that story?
What's funny is like when you just have to do something and you don't know any other way, you just kind of do it. And then it was more surprising to me when I started working on projects that like, had like more feature people attached or more feature sensibilities. And I'm looking around, I'm like, man, there's a lot of wasted time here. Like we wouldn't be sitting around, eating grapes, like waiting like this in television. Let's like go, 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 So
Yeah.
I found a beautiful balance somewhere in the middle, because television also like kills you literally, like it used to anyway. Like network television was a straight up like the traditional model was 8 days of shooting, 8 days of prep, and you're alternating.
Yeah.
We have a similar system like with The Boys with streaming, but you have a lot more days, but you're still alternating. So one big difference that people may not know about between like a feature and television is that while I'm, let's say, shooting episode, let's call it 401, so season 4, episode 1 of a show, you're also prepping 402 with another director. They alternate. You have different directors. You have different assistant directors. They alternate. Oftentimes, you also have different cinematographers. They alternate. But visual effects, very seldom do we alternate. So I'm managing both. I might nowadays have a little bit of a staff, so I have some people on set, and I'm covering multiple bases. But back in the day, it was just me. Like on Thomas, it was
Yeah.
just me. I was doing it all, one man band.
Wow.
So producing, data wrangling, supervising. So yeah, you're literally trying to juggle going to a meeting for one show while being on set for a sequence on another show, and then post comes in, and post also staggers. And usually you have like 12 days on a network show, maybe 20 of post. It
Wow.
depends. It gets tighter and tighter as the season goes. A little bit different on the boys. We do alternate filming, but we do have a little like more time in post. Like I'm in post right now, and we're not filming, so you do get a little more space. But when you're filming, it's still like with any show, anything with episodes, it's still like a checkerboard system, mostly, and it's
Definitely.
tough. Yeah.
And how does that sort of then impact, the actual storytelling part of what you're trying to do? Because, as I sort of talked about in the intro there, there's the spectacle of VFX, and let's put all the bells and whistles on things, but I think there's its impact upon how it tells the story. So when you're sort of working in those sort of ways, how do you navigate that part of it where you still want to be able to tell that story and still want to be able to do things that assist the story through VFX?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of different answers to that. One, I would say, is that art is unfair. And by that, I mean, you can spend a day doing something that you think is half-assed, and it could become the most famous thing that people respond to and connect with. And you can put your life and heart into something, and no one can give a shit about it. You just have to keep believing and doing, because you never do know. I will say, though, if you willingly know that you're taking a shortcut, or you're doing something not for the sake of the project, but for the sake of time or money, then that is when you get, or convenience, that is when you start veering away from creative integrity and into the business side of things. And audiences will pick up on that. Audiences in this day and age can smell a business move a mile away in their content that they're consuming. And the concept
Definitely.
of content and consumption is so complicated, but it's changing so much right now. Specifically, just in terms of like with visual effects, how do I manage it? I've learned specifically on the boys, which I would say the boys is my PhD. If I got a master's degree at USC, the boys has been my PhD in how to juggle all of this stuff, because I'm a different person now at the end of season 5 than I was at the beginning of season 1. I've also gone through COVID and some strikes and a lot
Yeah.
of personal things during that time as well. But I've come out better. I've come out stronger, and I think I've come out more happy and more wanting to create than ever before. And one of the things I've learned a lot from Eric Kripke, the creator of the show, um, he won't compromise the creative integrity. We'll cut something before we air it. You need to know the tone of what you're doing. You need to honor that tone. You need to respect it. You can't cheat the tone of what you're doing. So if I was doing a comedy that was more forgiving with let's say like driving, for example, like you could shoot driving on a green screen for comedy because you're there for the laughs. No one's going to care. No one needs the world to feel real and gritty.
Yeah.
But on the boys,
Seinfeld.
yeah, Seinfeld, exactly. But on the boys, we just can't do that. We only do
Yeah.
what's called real driving, because it's going to take you out of the world. But with blood, we started with what is real blood in the season 1, and quickly realized that we needed to amp up our blood work and make it sort of this, theater of the absurd level type of blood. It's like, what is real blood to a show that's based on a comic book that deals with killing people in the most glorious of ways? So that is
Yeah.
fantastical. I'm not going to sit here and say that the blood effects we do are photo real all the time. I'm going to say that they are the right tone for the show. So it's my job, and it's what I'm doing right now. I sit and I look at work from a lot of companies, and I help guide the creative vision and the tone of the shots. And sometimes you have to pitch re-editing a scene. Sometimes you have to pitch cutting a shot. Sometimes you have to pitch a slight edit for the timing. Sometimes you have to try different visual effects. I play a very strong game in production. I'm very forthright with everyone about what I think works and doesn't. I try and be respectful and tactful, but I'm in a unique position. I'm one of the
Yeah.
only, I think I might be the only below the line job that starts in prep, goes through production, and all the way through post on set.
Yeah. Wow.
Um, and so you have to realize the cinematographers in television, even the directors, directors get their edit and then they leave. And then the
Mm.
producers in television cut the show after the directors leave. So and I respect directors. I obviously love directors and I've worked with so many great directors on these shows. But if a director, on a show is like, oh, I'm not going to use that piece, don't worry, because I'm looking at it and I'm like, we can't shoot that. It's going to cost $1 million. I'm like, don't worry, I won't use it. It's like, well, with all due respect, like if it's filmed, you actually legally, like as the rules go of this game, and I'm not saying I agree with them or not, but you don't actually get that final say. If the creator decide of the show or the producers or Amazon or someone decides they want to use that piece of footage that exists, they're going to use it and I'm going to have to deal with it. Right.
Yeah. The
So
other
that's
end.
yeah. So that's a difficult thing to navigate. And what I've learned again is you never, obviously no one's around to be mean to anybody. You're
Yeah.
there to, and you don't want to feel like you're condescending to people. You just want to like be kind to people, educate them a little bit if you can, build empathy with people, let them know that you're there for them. And I am. At the end of the day, like I would tell that director, like, look, I'm here to make you the best show. Like I want you to look like a rock star filming the show. And if you film that, it's probably, going to look like shit in
Yep.
post because we don't have the time and money. I get that, when you did this big $1 billion show, you guys were able to do it, but we don't have that money and our tone is different, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how you deal with it. I will say that I have a little tenure on the boys because I've been around so long and been working with a lot of the same wonderful people for a long time. It's always difficult when you start something new,
Yeah, I can
because
imagine.
you can't come in. It's like a reality TV show. You don't want to draw a target on your back at the beginning of Survivor. You're going to be the first one voted off the island. So you kind of got to lay low and like just really get your social game strong at the beginning. And that's something I've had to work on in life because, I was relatively antisocial for a long time, but you learn.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you must have seen so many changes in the VFX industry, like over the last couple of decades. I mean, what's the most significant evolution that you've sort of witnessed and how you've sort of had to adapt to that over that time?
Yeah, I mean, I hopped on when it was shooting up and it was growing and becoming more accessible. There's a generation before me, the wonderful people that did some of the early, you know, stuff crushed it. From Jurassic Park on from 1994 to 2004. Let's say it was just a huge time before my time, but the sad reality is, I would say right now is the biggest change in visual effects that I've seen. A lot,
Yeah.
obviously, the business changed a lot through COVID. We're in a post-strike era right now, and not only are we in a post-strike era, we're in a post-strike era with a lot of tumultuous politics in the world, and AI.
Yeah.
And I don't think AI is the I'm not looking at AI like the sales pitch that everyone's trying to pitch right now. I don't necessarily think that's going to work, but I do see value in new tools. I always have. Again, I come from learning computers. When I was learning computers as a kid, there was the fear that those computer kids were going to take the jobs of the factory workers, that didn't know computers, and they did. Everything changed, right?
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, there's a huge shift in the type of labor and the need for labor coming right now. There's also a globalization of the industry and maybe a counter globalization. I don't know. It's again very confusing in strange times with our politics right now in this country. I sense a lot of fear and concern, and so I am trying to get the work and get the jobs that get people working. But there's a shift. You have to learn it. You have to embrace new
Yeah.
technology and learn how to use it. Again, I don't think AI can replace a human. I think it's a tool that has to be learned and learned how to be used. But I've seen it really shake things up right now.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, is it Nuke 2.0 for you in the sense of seeing something new and you wanting to like drive people around you to embrace how that tool might be the future that might end up
yeah,
being that thing that then you look around and you go, wow, got this. That's actually ended up with a lot of people getting a lot of jobs because this is sort of
I mean,
I've
it
been
it
through this
it
before.
It 100% can be because one, I actually, again, I don't think AI is quite what people think it is. I don't think it's going to be creating, we have this thing called the uncanny valley in visual effects where we've tried creating humans, photoreal humans forever in visual effects, and we just can't do it. They just have no soul, right? And so I don't see AI getting past the uncanny valley. All these AI things I see, yeah, it looks super great, like to the pixel photoreal, but it's still weird. It's just got
Yep.
this weird, you can't shake from it. And sometimes you can use the weird. That's the thing. You can make some kludgy montage commercial and weird and be okay, but you can't you can't go make the next Paul Thomas Anderson or Steven Spielberg movie in AI. You just can't do it, right? And there's other great directors and creators out there that you're never going to be able to recreate that. The problem is right now we're at this strange intersection of like business where we have a bubble burst, right? And boy, my friend called it a long time ago that the model was going to burst, and I was like, "No, you're crazy," but it sure did. There was a race in streaming to just get to be the best, to get the
Yeah.
viewers to be the best, and so that led to this wonderful time of just big projects being greenlit by the studios. But as always happens, and somewhat rightfully so, some people looked at the accounting and realized like we're losing a ton of money. There's just no way around it. So now we need to figure out how to monetize this. And arguably, sometimes things are like over monetized. They're like, oh, we really can't, but in general, it's like there's a correction, I would call it right now. And I've seen it happen before. But the correction means that the type of content that's going to be made is going to be more fiscally responsible. And generally speaking, more fiscally responsible probably means less giant visual effects or experimenting with AI for those giant effects. It really is going to be very specific depending on the content and the hits and misses. So I look at AI as like adding another thing, like a new category. I don't look at it as replacing the other categories, but it's like, again, it's like when reality television came out, everyone was afraid it was going to replace television because it's cheaper to make and it was cutting all these corners, blah, blah, blah. It ended up just becoming another category
Yeah.
for television. It didn't replace network television. It didn't replace dramas and comedies and sitcoms. I think tastes ebb and flow. I think you'll have a couple years where sitcoms are in and people like them. I think you'll have a couple years where people want like, these like slow burn dramas, and then, people get bored and kind of move on to the next thing, and that's okay. That's part of art is living and breathing. Painting's still
Yeah.
here, but painting used to be very much a trade tool for capturing portraits. I was talking to my mom about this actually, and she's like, a lot of portraits weren't art like they are considered now. They were people getting hired by family, rich families, to paint what we would consider a photograph right now, a family portrait. They became art because they were well done by some more than others, but they weren't going in there, with the mindset of like, I'm an artiste. They were people that had a drive to do it. Then photography, then computers, and now, yeah, so it's an evolution, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, so when you're working on a project, then on that basis, how do you know when you've found the right creative solution versus like just settling for something that works?
That is a great question. I have had you have to learn to cut your losses in television with time. So sometimes if I had the option to noodle every visual effect shot in the world forever, I would, looking for that perfection because I enjoy it. I enjoy the process of crafting a well-made frame, well-composed shot. Um,
Yeah.
but time is a consideration. Money are considerations. Like what I've learned is I'm not that guy that is so, like, I would say, creatively arrogant, that I'm gonna ignore the money and the time. Because one, again, it's a team sport. I work with wonderful producers and coordinators. These are all great human beings, and I've worked with many different ones that bring different things to the table, but they deserve to have a good life too. And if they put in good work, they deserve to be rewarded for that good work. And so the producer's job, visual effects producer's job, is to be responsible for the schedule and the money. I mean, ultimately, it all falls on me. if it falls apart, I take the blame, but they will usually take the hit if we go over budget or over schedule. And why would I want to look the other way and not work with that person? I think it's sort of a yin and yang situation, like 80% creative, 20% money and finance. So I'll look at shots sometimes. I did it today. I'll look at a shot and I'll say, I wanted this thing. We're not quite getting there. I could noodle 3 more versions, but I think it's time to deliver this so they can move on to these other shots and focus on the other things that we need and think about the big picture. And that's
Yeah,
just come about with experience, I think, and just, time and learning myself.
definitely, definitely. And it's interesting. We talk about it. My side of the industry with clients and the work we do in design is that you've got quality, time, and cost. And and we call them
Yeah.
the 3 suitcases. You can have any two,
Yeah.
but you
And
can't have
two.
all three.
It's that
So,
triangle. Yeah. No, I mean,
it's
it's
difficult.
so funny. It's so funny you say that. When I was working at this one company, I was a creative director. I was pitching around town, and I would had this bullshit thing where I'd say like, "We figured out how to have all three," and we super didn't. It was a complete lie, but it sounded really good, and I was getting
It's a good
rewarded
pitch.
for yeah, I was getting rewarded for going out there and peddling this bullshit. But nowadays I'd be like, "Come on, like, there's no." But yeah, it's pretty true. The time, quality, money triangle is a pretty, pick two, but not three. But yeah, it just comes down to like, in a sense, my job is kind of like a judge. I have to sit and pass judgment on each shot and decide whether it's good enough or not good enough for what we're doing, given the time and money that we have. Sometimes I'll say like, hey guys, like, we're in trouble. We need more time or money, or we need to figure out something. I've shifted my perspective a lot. Admittedly, a lot of people in my position. So to give a little context, I'm now on the client side. I'm what's called a client side visual effects supervisor, which means that I work directly for Sony, Amazon, Eric Kripke, and the show. And I have a
Yep.
team of about, I have one VFX producer, we have a production manager, 3 coordinators, and 2 visual effects editors on our team here. But then we contract out to numerous companies, like probably 7 to 9 visual effects companies all over the world. You've heard the names: DNA, ILM, things like that.
Yeah, cool.
And so I then communicate with each one of those companies. They'll have a visual effects supervisor for that company. That's how you can see there's like 72 visual effects supervisors on a project, because it's a lot. It takes a village, right?
Yeah.
Um, so when I'm talking to these companies, like, it's my job to shepherd them through it. And in the past, I've been on the other side and I've worked with the me on other shows. And there's always been like a tension. There's just this assumption that they're this holier than thou character or something like that. I had that assumption, and the truth is we're not. We're all just people trying to get it done. So sometimes, like, when you're pulling work from one company and giving it to another company, or you're trying to like figure out what's what, none of us are perfect. So sometimes it changes a little bit. And what I've realized that you don't want to look at any company or any work punitively. You just constantly want to look at it like, how can I help you, get through this moment? So if I'm telling you guys that, we're adjusting the work, and maybe moving some work from company A to company B, it's not to hurt your company. It's because I've actually been on your side, and you're going to lose money if you do this work, because I'm going to work
Yep.
you to the bone, and it just might not be your forte, right? So, but if you do this other thing, you're going to look like a rock star, and your company is going to
Yeah.
get some great press, and you might even make a little bit of money. So I really take it on me to try and balance all of that, right? And it can be a stressful job.
Yeah, I can imagine. And look, thinking about that sort of empathetic approach to how you're dealing with the people you are, and thinking back to, the younger guy peddling the I've got all 3 suitcases
Yeah, yeah.
model.
I was selling some
Like,
snake oil. Yeah,
yeah.
yes, I was.
What sort of advice would you give yourself, when you're starting out, when you're going through this sort of journey to a younger version of you?
So I would actually give some advice to industry leaders out there, not necessarily to myself, but I think something that's very common is that people that start doing well get put into positions of leadership, middle management, whatever. And that happened to me. All of a sudden I got put into a position where I was in charge of people, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to manage people. I'd never been taught a management class. Early 30s, early to mid 30s. I was having some, like personal life issues, like I wasn't very happy with who I was as a person, and sort of hiding who I was from the world, and just it led to a lot of inner anger. And if you're angry yourself, that anger is going to project on everyone else. It's a pretty obvious thing. And so you you do the scorched earth technique. It's like the tobacco plant. It's easy to grow, but it destroys the soil. So I would go out there and I would scream and yell and just get results, like I'm in a football game or something like that. And I'm not like that big into sports, but I'm assuming that's how it works. And yeah, in the short term, it works. You get these results, but you burn out fast. The soil
Yeah.
gets destroyed. And the problem is I was getting rewarded for that behavior by a lot
Yeah.
of people because I'm bringing them money. I'm bringing them, uh, things to put on their shelf, like trophies, things like that. So that's not the way to do it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. Like I have my moments. Everybody does. You get angry, you get sad, you get happy, whatever. But at the end of the day, you have to like find that balance in you, and you have to appreciate that humans are humans. And,
Yeah.
you know, you have to, it's the hard path, but you have to figure out how to work to get them to do their best without destroying them. I mean,
Yep.
it's that simple, which is a
Yep.
very hard thing to do or say right now, because I think culturally we're fighting that zeitgeist in the United States of America.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, it's so powerful because, we are just all people at the end of the day,
At the end of the day, we're
It's
all people, and I like to sometimes imagine what my employees or people at other companies are doing on their off time, not looking at their social media, literally just like an imagination technique in my head, just
uh,
imagining they have a family or a parent or a sister or a brother or whatever. Even if they don't, it doesn't matter. But that just reminds, or a pet, but that just reminds me of the human nature of them, because at the end of the day, most people, not all people, but most people just want to live a enjoyable life as much as
yep.
possible.
Yep. Indeed. Indeed. Look, before we wrap up, we do a little thing at the end of each pod called the Fast Five. And
All right.
it's just me giving you 5 quick questions for you to give me a 1-word answer. It sounds pretty simple, right?
Sure. Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. So, on set or post production?
On set.
On set. Easy one. Dream shoot location.
Los Angeles.
Why LA? Just
Because I haven't
the
shot here
scene.
in a long time, and it's my hometown and it's my city, and like
Yeah.
nothing big with visual effects is shooting here anymore. And so I'd love to just be able to do something in my city.
Bring it back home. I like it. What's your go-to comfort food during long work days?
That's a tough one. Weirdly. Coffee. It's not really a
The
food,
coffee
but
fiend.
yeah, I
It's a
have,
meal in a cup, right? So
yeah, no, I actually, we didn't touch upon it, but I hit kind of like I had a kind of a life low around March of this year. It was in the winter in Toronto. And so I got on a health journey. So I eat like really like straight, like I have a strict diet. So I actually avoided eating any craft services or catering on set for most of the last season and made my own food just to stick to a strict diet. So, but coffee is my one like vice, I would say. Like I just love me some coffee.
I love that. Um, Vintage camera or cutting edge tech?
I literally have, like, I'm not kidding you. I've got this camera sitting right here, my X106. I've got this
So
video
cool.
camera sitting right here. I'm putting together. It's a FX3 system I'm putting together with some anamorphic lenses sitting right down there. I also have a vintage film camera downstairs. I would say, I'm going to go with modern tech.
Cool. Cool. And then a fun one for the finish. Disney or rock concert?
It's like an evolution. I would say rock concert, although I have recently found a lot of joy in. I was just in Disneyland yesterday. I found a lot of joy in Disney. Again, like politically right now, they kind of piss me off a little bit. So a little bit of. I was only there yesterday because I already had the ticket, by the way. But rock concert. I'm an old rocker at heart.
Love it. Love it. What's your favorite?
My favorite band.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I grew up on like Nine Inch Nails, some punk rock stuff, ska, things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I was at Emergence Creative recently at a creative conference over here, and we had an industry guy by the name of Nobby who talked in a world of AI, we need to become more punk, because
Yeah.
punk is like, it's every other music is kind of a derivative of another piece of music, but punk is completely its own thing. And if we want to play against AI, we've got to be more punk. So
I love it. I love punk rock. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Look, mate, thank you so much for joining us today. And it's all we've got time for on this episode of Creative Glue, but please join us for our next episode as we continue to explore the glue that brings creatives together. If you haven't already, check out the rest of the Creative Glue episodes available on our YouTube channel, Spotify, or Apple Podcast. Like, subscribe, and stay tuned to see who'll be joining us next on Creative Glue.
Your ideas and my ideas will stick together like glue. 'Cause we've got the creative